Hello and welcome to ARISA Foundation's podcast, Native Narratives. Today we have Sagar joining us. Sagar is a software engineer by profession. He started off as a software engineer, but then he pivoted into a more creative field, which is like digital marketing. And now I believe that you're also into gardening as well as you have a bunch of different hobbies. And you've started a business called Jungle in a Jar, which is your hobby of making terrariums, right?
Right. Yeah. Thanks, Varun, for having me on your really cool podcast.
We're glad
And
to have you.
yeah, and also a really long explanation about what I do. But if I have to put it in a crux, I would say that I started off as an engineer, software engineer. I didn't find it to be extremely satisfying. Like, there's like a little creative bug in you that you want to kind of feed,
Yeah.
and that wasn't really happening. I kind of naturally veered towards communications to some extent.
Mhm.
I did my master's and then moved on to a more creative field, a slightly more creative field. I joined the media, but on the digital front, like you said.
Yeah.
Not so much digital marketing, but about digital news dissemination. And then now I have moved on to a more sort of education-based job role. I also work with a university now. We manage certain programs, and I am again creatively, putting things together for the program. And at the same time, I'm feeding my hobby, like you said, making terrariums. And at the same time, I'm also the creative head at a farm in Pune, where we kind of acquaint people with nature, kind of pulling them back into nature and saying that, hey, there is this place with lots of trees. Come here, do your stuff, explore your talents. And what I do is I organize different events and different concerts or like, movie screenings, etc. there, which help bring like-minded people together.
That's really, really cool. And it's nice to meet someone who has their foot in like so many different avenues of life
Yeah,
and just
that
exploring so much.
that's one way to put it. Another way to put it is also somebody who's still not, discovered exactly what they want.
That's also true.
It could also be that, we're just all doing that on
Mhm.
a more subconscious level.
Yeah,
We're all doing that, right?
definitely.
So I'm glad to be here, and yeah,
We're glad to have you. So today we're going to talk about like the role of art in general and the role that people's identities play in their art.
right.
And in your experience, has your personal identity affected the way that you view art in general?
To be really honest, I think art as a medium of expression is influenced heavily by the environment that you're brought up in. Uh, Obviously, there's always this debate about nature versus nurture, whether you're inherently talented and that's why you're doing certain things,
Right.
or whether external environments have played a role in it. And I think it is a bit of both. And I don't know if you agree.
I do.
But
So there's also this quote by I think Roger Federer, I believe that um, hard work beats talent if talent doesn't work hard. So
yeah, yeah.
like art is also another form of talent. Like you have to practice and keep improving at your art.
Absolutely. So I'd say in my personal case, definitely in terms of how much encouragement one got growing up. So I was always encouraged to kind of pursue any form of art that I liked. So I used to draw. I have taken exams in drawing. I used to definitely take part in all the possible cultural activities that would happen, whether it's dance, whether it's drama in my society, in our complex, etc.
Right.
Even in school, I'd always be a part of the annual day in some way or the other, not necessarily always in in limelight. I've taken up public speaking at one point of time in my life, and then gardening has always been a passion. I think I grew up gardening, learning a little bit from my grandmother as well, in taking some tips and tricks from there.
Yeah.
So it's always been a part of the upbringing. When you talk about identity, I think identity is made up of various different factors. One, of course, is what you inherit. There is your conditioning. And then, of course, when you're growing up, I think after a certain stage in life, you do start looking at your gender identity in one way. You look at your personal identity in terms of who am I, like what defines me. There is always this surge of emotions that comes up when you're around, in your teens, or you're exploring the world in various different formats.
Right.
And I personally believe that there are certain experiences that queer people might go through in their lives that do shape the way in which they view the world. And creativity is I think, it's an outlet for a lot of emotions, and it's a great outlet. I think, if a poet is not sad enough in his own life, he's not going to write great poetry.
Right.
Yeah, right. Or if a filmmaker has not, experienced emotions himself or herself or themselves, they will not be able to portray that, in front of an audience of millions of people.
Right.
So you do need to have that experience. You need to go through something. And I believe everybody, whether irrespective of what they identify as, go through these emotions. Certain communities will definitely have it slightly more intense than others, right?
Definitely, yeah.
So that's how I think, that's how I think uh, gender identity or your general identity plays an important role in how creativity is expressed in your future.
Yeah, art is definitely a reflection of reality and the experiences that we have. And even in my experience, so I'm someone who loves filmmaking. And just personally, I've written a bunch of scripts, even though I haven't like made anything out of it yet. Like I haven't made those films actually. But I found out that a lot of the times, whether it was intentional or not, a part of myself was always in those films.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I mean, you have to put your, like, I always feel like, you've seen a Harry Potter movie, right? In the book
Yeah.
as well, that Voldemort at one point, divides his soul into 7 parts, and
Right.
then, he stores it in different locations.
Mhm.
I think every artist, whichever form of art you do, right? Whether it's a
Yeah.
song, whether it's a movie or whatever, you have to put a part of yourself into it, and it always stays there. So after 10 years, it might not be as prevalent, but it is always going to be relevant, like it's always a part of you
Yeah.
that is there in that piece of art. And every time you look at it, every time people look at it, they're going to interpret you,
Through
not
that
just
art.
your work. They're going to interpret you, yeah, through that artwork.
Also, that's a very interesting conversation, a comparison. I've never thought of it that way.
Yeah.
But it is very true. Like you just leave a part of yourself.
Right, right.
Yeah.
And they always say that if you want to be immortalized, you fall in love with an artist because you are going to get immortalized in that person's artwork.
True, true.
Whether they write a poem about you, I mean, being the head runner for that.
Yeah.
It's always like that, and you cannot separate art and life, is what I think. Someone might say, oh, he or she doesn't, like they don't have any talent, they are not an artist. It's not true. There is always some field where they are an artist.
Yeah, I agree with you.
Whether they might have great
100%.
handwriting,
Yeah.
they might be great at what they wear, or how they select combinations in their life, at solving problems.
Yeah.
Solving problems, I think, is also an art.
Definitely.
Yeah. Sports as well, to some extent, is art. Right?
Yeah. I am of the belief that everything is art.
Okay.
And as you said, sports, even like, so I play volleyball. Even watching a play where everything comes together, like all the teammates are in sync, everything goes the way that you want it to. You're in control of every single aspect of the game. That's beautiful in a way, and that to me is art in many ways.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, I think that's great that you think that like that. I mean, I'd say that even sport, like team sports, you can look at it as like kind of almost a dance wherein you would make a move, you want your partner to make a move, and then it's a little bit of
Exactly, yeah, I agree
a
with you.
relay of thoughts, a relay of actions as well. Yeah, that's an interesting interpretation.
So, how do you think art influences us? We've spoken about how our lives influence art, right? How do you think art affects the way that we view society?
Oh man, in a huge way, I think that every society that has had artists and have given the freedom to those artists to express their innermost thoughts or any sort of emotion more freely has always been more progressive, has always moved on to become something bigger than the art itself.
Yeah.
Right. Whether it is resistance art, like you have Banksy going around and putting his artwork on buildings and kind of putting a strong message out there, whether it is repressed art or it is an artwork that is celebrated throughout the world, like you have your Monets and your Da Vinci's and so on. Irrespective, art always reflects society, but art influences society as well.
Yeah.
And I don't know if you know about shock art. Like every new art form at one point was shock art, wherein it shocked the society,
Okay.
and it kind of normalizes over a period of time, like 10 years or 20 years down the line. It's not shock art anymore.
Yeah, makes sense.
Yeah.
So yesterday I was at this film festival, and there was a film documentary slash film about this person, an artist, who made this bicycle with glass organs in it. Glass organs are like those glasses where you put water in it and you sort of move your finger around the rim and it produces a certain tone, a
Right,
pitch.
right.
So that was also like he started off as it being more of a thing that shocks people, that intrigues people and brings them in. And eventually, once people got used to it, it was more of, he's an actual artist. Like, I don't want to use the term actual artist, but people started appreciating his art for what his art was rather
Right.
than it just being something new that they're experiencing.
Yeah, that's an interesting point because, like you said, you appreciate the art for what it is and not because it's something new.
Yeah.
Uh, Going back to your question about whether art influences society or society influences art or how, I think that is really up for debate because in several instances you see that artwork definitely influences the way we think. Like look at TikTok right now.
Yeah.
Uh, Look at Instagram or look at any other app that's like using music or using other people's artwork to produce more artwork, right? So there is always this chain of art that happens.
True.
At the same time, the society definitely influences art, right? Like as a society changes, uh, its outlook towards art changes, but also it adds more perspective in the sense that if you don't have an audience for your art, I don't know whether it would definitely count as art, but I don't know whether it really is going to make any impact at all. So I think there are two elements
True.
that are going to balance, like, there is a little dance that happens between them, and that is necessary
That
for
is
art
very
to
true.
evolve
Yeah.
and for the society to evolve at the same time. So they are two inseparable elements.
Yeah. And I want to get back to what you said about like resistance art. In a lot of ways, art is very political. It can be political. It can be like sort of neutral in a lot of ways too. But I believe that a lot of good art is oftentimes influential. It wants to say something about the society itself. Um, so what do you think about that? Like in terms of representation, for example, being a thing in art that's often brought up during these conversations.
Um, Art that speaks volumes is always something that is appreciated as well. Maybe not initially, but historically, when you look back retrospectively, it is always appreciated. You know, they always say, you buy art from a painter who's alive, or you see an
Exactly.
artist who's
Yeah.
alive, because that is a person who really needs your support.
Yeah.
So definitely art that kind of passes on a message that has albeit like a hidden message, even if you may say so, but it still has a message to itself. To it is definitely something that needs to be encouraged.
Yeah.
And I think that whether it's political, social, whether it is kind of raising awareness about a particular person or a community, it definitely needs a kind of exposure, and people need to know about it, irrespective of whether it achieves its goal or not.
Right.
That's not in our control, but people need to know about it, and why not? I always say, like, why not? Like,
Yeah, I get you. So let's talk more about your art in general.
Right. So I do a lot of things. I enjoy art in everyday life. I feel like my day isn't complete unless I do something creative in the day. It is a part of it. Whether it is gardening, whether it is painting, I also paint, and or whether it is building a terrarium or talking about it to somebody or writing. Right. I think all these are mediums of expression.
Yeah.
And my day, honestly, it feels incomplete if I don't do one of these things. Um, in terms of what I'm doing most these days, I really enjoy making terrariums. Like we spoke before about it. There are two types of terrariums. There's an open terrarium and a closed terrarium. A closed one is more of a tropical environment inside where you need to really regulate the moisture of things inside. And it's a great mix of science and art because if you want to study water percolation, groundwater, whether you want to study precipitation and evaporation, you want to study water cycles, you want to study life in a tropical environment. It is a piece of a tropical forest that you're keeping close to you in your house, in your surroundings. At the same time, an open terrarium is a representation of a desert environment, equally beautiful, equally charming, and low maintenance. And I enjoy making them because it helps me apply all the little intriguing science bits that I have in my head. Like, I like geography, I like geology, I enjoy, figuring out what stone it is, what minerals it contains, how things work, how plants grow, how they adapt to a closed environment. Like, there are times when certain plants which have very hard stems in an open environment become softer, gentler, their leaves become smaller when they are in a closed environment like a terrarium, similar to how it would be in a very moist tropical forest. That's very interesting. It is, and it's a great mixture of science and art, I feel. You're also in total control of your little world that you've created, right? Like the way you have aquarium, similarly you have a terrarium. Terra means the earth or land or soil. Like terracotta is cooked earth. Right. Terrestrial is something that roams around on land. Similarly, you have a little slice of the earth in your house. It is a representation, a replica of what happens in nature. It's a great way to study, and I believe it was developed and studied by scientists who wanted to bring a piece of what they were researching back to their own countries or own lands or own places. So it's a great thing to build and make. Yeah. That's a very, very exciting thing to talk about, both personally as an organization, because that's also something that we focus on. We focus on, and even in our philosophy of, just doing something art related every single day, and how your day feels sort of incomplete without it. One of our goals is to sort of study and inculcate art into our daily lives to improve the well-being of our lives. And I generally think that doing something artistic every single day helps you a lot. And there have been a lot of studies talking about this as well, like proper Right. neuroscience studies. Absolutely. So I think art has the power to put you in flow. Um, I think at some point I had studied the psychology of creativity, where we were studying theories by Csikszentmihalyi, who was a scientist who spoke about being in flow, like how you forget to eat, forget to do basic things. Right. When you are in flow and when you're concentrating on work, whether it is music or dance or art. You start painting, you start reading, for example, you start writing. Even And volleyball. yeah, When I'm playing volleyball, I do not have a single care in the world. I could be playing right, it right, all day exactly. long. So when you're playing or when you're writing, when you're composing music or you're painting, and you get into a flow wherein nothing else matters, you want to do this. You want to reach a point that feels okay, I'm satisfied now. Now I can think about other things in life. Yeah. Right? Um, Inculcating that into your daily life is extremely important, I feel. To also, kind of have a sense of identity in the sense that who am I? Am I just a corporate worker? Am I someone who, is an accountant or, is a lawyer or whatever? Or am I someone who also has an artistic side? Right. I think every individual has an artistic side. It is a lot about how much you feed which monster. Like you all have those little monsters, I don't know, but like have little pets, like Yeah. Who do you feed more? Which part of your personality do you nurture more? So art is a part of life. Yeah. And I think it's a very important part because it isn't just that it's a separate part, but it also allows you to explore different parts of yourself. right?
Like it allows you to talk about your corporate experiences, your gender identity, your personal
Absolutely. Like, I
experiences.
mean, just speaking about my own personal journey,
Mhm.
I began making terrariums as a hobby. It was a casual conversation with friends about, I had a friend who's an architect who spoke about, learning about this new art form so that he could include that in his designs.
Yeah.
Something to do as a hobby. I was talking to a friend of mine who was a biodiversity expert about, what kind of plants to select, what kind of
Right,
stuff to
right,
put
right.
to keep it more sustainable. And while they were talking about it, I found it interesting. And I kept waiting for that point to come when, they say, okay, hey, we're gonna make it now. Do you want to come? And
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
because that's what we decided, we'll all do it together. Eventually that didn't really happen. And I'm like, you know what, let me just give it a shot on my own. So I did
That's
it.
amazing.
I tried it, and I always feel that it's very important to learn through failures. And honestly, I don't think I can claim to have made all my plants live. I think I've killed a lot of plants to learn what works and what doesn't work, right? And
That's just a part of life. It's
yeah,
inevitable.
yeah, someone who's passionate about plants and about learning more about environment.
Mhm.
I think making a terrarium was very satisfactory.
Mhm.
It also helped me, maintain sanity during and after the pandemic, where a lot of things are not in your control,
Right.
Like I get to travel a lot for my work,
Mhm.
and all travel was stopped after COVID, and for a very long time.
Yeah.
And it is daunting at times because you wonder what's going to happen. Like, I've said, okay, this season I'm traveling here, I'm going to do this for my work.
Mhm.
It's great, I enjoy it. And then suddenly, no, you can't go, you can't do this, you can't do that. It's
Mhm.
not in your control, right? When things are going to come
Exactly.
back to normal. And at that point, having a hobby that, and I hate calling it hobby per se, but having an outlet for it, an artistic outlet, was very important for me. Building something that you have complete control over, whether you're a painter, whether you're a poet, whether you're a dancer, having the ability to say, hey, I'm going to compose my own dance move,
Yeah.
and it is mine.
Mhm.
It is totally under my control. If I want to bring my hand in at one point, I want to do it.
Yeah.
Right? It is in your
Completely yours. Yeah.
internal locus of control. It gives a sense of calmness,
Hmm.
definitely. And building terrariums also does that. Anybody into gardening will tell you why it is so calming and satisfactory.
Mhm.
There are also studies, I have not gone in depth to kind of research that, but there are studies that prove that putting your hand in soil
Mhm.
and having a connection to earth
Yeah.
also helps calm your nerves.
That's very
Right?
interesting. Yeah.
So that is again, like, why should gardening and why should plants be an important subject in schools or, generally while growing up?
Yeah.
It is very important, not just to study the scientific phenomena more easily
Mhm.
and understand it practically without actually going and seeing a waterfall.
Yeah. I would have, yeah, I would have loved to have the opportunity to create a terrarium myself when I was like growing up or in
Yeah,
school.
absolutely. I think it is, and you still have that opportunity.
Yeah,
By the way, you
definitely,
still have it.
definitely. I'm definitely
Because,
gonna
yeah.
look into
So
it.
it is a fun thing to do, and it is a fun thing to maintain as well.
Mhm.
And I hope that it does get a little more recognition than it does at this point of time.
Yeah.
But I'm fine even if it doesn't. It's okay.
Yeah.
I have enjoyed making it, and that's what's more important.
Yeah,
So,
that's nice.
yeah.
It's that sense of self-satisfaction that truly matters at the end of the day.
Yeah, and it just happened. I think subconsciously we kind of have a plan in our
Mhm.
heads, but consciously I did not have any plan to kind of put it out there. I was doing it for myself,
Mhm.
because I enjoyed doing it.
Right.
But all hobbies, passions, whatever you want to call them, artistic outlets,
Mhm.
tend to get expensive after a while.
That is also very
Yeah,
true.
right. Like, I mean, sports, for example.
Yeah.
Right? Like, I mean, if you go to play volleyball, you need to book a court somewhere, do something, buy a ball. I mean,
Yeah.
there are 10 expenses to that, right? So it is great when you're appreciated for your art and it's bought.
Mhm.
It definitely fuels, uh, at least motivates you to make more of it, for
Yeah.
sure. Yeah.
Makes sense.
So personally, that is how things have been, and yeah,
We should definitely collaborate. Like, I feel like an event or like a terrarium making session with Arisa, that would be amazing.
absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely, I'm open to that.
I'm sure that we'll have plenty of audience for that as well because um, most of the people who follow us are also very intrigued by this intersection of arts and sciences,
Yeah.
and it's very nice to explore.
Yeah, I mean, there are so many different, I'll tell you honestly, there are so many different things where art and science comes together. I think most times it does.
Mm-hmm.
Like when you're painting, subconsciously you're thinking about color theory,
Yeah.
right? When you want to highlight a primary color, you're thinking about, okay, what else can I use to highlight it?
Mm-hmm.
Like you have green leaves, but if you put a little bit of red at the bottom, it highlights those green leaves.
Yeah.
So that's nothing but color theory in practice,
True.
right?
True. Very
You may
true.
not consciously be using science,
Mm-hmm.
but subconsciously your brain somewhere is like, oh, maybe in my second standard, third standard, I learned that this is the color wheel, and this is where the colors are intersecting, or you have purple and orange on opposite sides.
Right. Right.
A beautician, a makeup artist, a hairstylist, hair colorist,
They're all using the same
everyone uses
principle.
science,
Yeah.
right? If you ask a hair colorist, I would consider them as artists,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Hair
Definitely.
artists.
Same.
You ask them that, hair color क्या अच्छा लगेगा, hair style. They know exactly what happens when bleach is put on your hair.
Mm-hmm.
They know exactly how the hair follicles open up. They
Yeah.
know exactly how much color to use, what proportions to use.
To get you the exact
You
thing that you
talk to a chef, they will know what temperature is required,
Mm-hmm.
at what speed your pizza has to be cooked to make it exactly the way it should taste,
Yeah.
right? So there is science built into every single art form, whether it is cooking, baking, sand art.
Mm-hmm.
You have to understand consistency, density, granularity of your sand
Exactly.
to
Yeah.
make sand art, right? I don't think there are two things that can be separated from each other ever.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah.
At what point do you start catering to the mainstream audiences in an attempt to make your art reach them? Versus at what point do you just stand your ground and be bold about your art and be very stubborn in a way that this is my art, you can either accept it or not, and I'm not budging. So what do you think about that?
Um, See, art is again, we've spoken before, that it's a little subjective in terms of how someone might perceive it.
Mhm.
I feel everybody should put their work out there, whether it's good, bad. They should really not be that judge of that. I think people can do that,
Mhm.
and there has to, in my opinion, be a mainstream, and then experimental stuff as
Mhm.
well. And as society progresses, as it becomes more accepting,
Mhm.
the the experimental stuff, or stuff that may not be mainstream at one point, will eventually start merging with the mainstream as well.
Makes
And
sense.
it's not always a bad thing to be mainstream.
Mhm.
I know that the drivers for these two things are very different. One could be commercial benefits, and the
Mhm.
other could be more of a
Satisfying the soul of the artist.
satisfaction. Yeah, like you're creating something that you want to make, right?
Yeah.
I don't see a difference between creating something that you want to make and creating something that people might like watching, or people
Hmm.
might like listening to, or people might like experiencing, to
Hmm.
give it an umbrella term.
Right.
I don't see that there's a huge difference between that. Now, whether it does, you want to label it mainstream or you want to label it niche, it's up to the viewer, is what I feel, right?
Yeah, I agree with you.
Art is art at the end of the day. Whether
Hmm.
you like it or not, it's so subjective, and whether
Yeah.
it's mainstream or not, whether it makes money, it doesn't make money, I think that's a very secondary thought.
Hmm.
If that drives your purpose of creating art, I don't know how much of I don't want to say the word truth, but how much substance there is to that. Yeah.
Makes sense. But I feel like, unfortunately, the reality is that people do, not people, but bigger corporations do tend to sort of sacrifice that individuality and sacrifice that voice in order to achieve something that appeals to a wider audience. Um, be it like, be it something that's very inconsequential, such as like, you know, editing your movie in a certain way. There are certain editing styles
Mhm.
which would probably appeal to an audience, while a quote unquote normal, a more general editing style would appeal to a wider audience. Now, this doesn't necessarily have to um, be the only way in which they differentiate between these two. Uh, Obviously, it's Pride Month, so talking about queer representation in media,
Mhm.
there have also been instances where sort of studios chose to let go of that queer representation or not show queer representation in order to have a wider appeal, which I think is obviously not the best thing for the studios themselves to do.
Right. So I mean, you're talking about whether studio should do this or studio should do that, or how someone should handle their product is something that is difficult to talk about. Uh, Art is commercialized, and obviously, that is something that is not always the best.
Yeah, it's an
But
inescapable truth, unfortunately.
yeah, it's a good balance. I feel that if people look at it this way, as in, we're taking 10 steps forward, maybe there will be times when, you know, I think it's important to figure out why an organization or a company or an artist chose to, kind of curtail their art or curb their thing rather than looking at, "Oh, why didn't this happen and it should have happened and I want it to happen and all." It's right, but it's also important to study why. And there could be so many factors, right? It's a multifaceted A, society.
Right.
B, when you're talking about a larger scale production, there are 100 people that need to be involved in it, and there are opinions, and what should be done, what should be not. I think it's a lot about taking executive calls at that point of time. But yeah, it's definitely important to study why this
Certain
happened.
decisions were
Yeah,
made.
yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely, and kind of make them aware of the existence of a community that wants more representation, of a community that needs more visibility,
Yeah.
and eventually leading to acceptability. So I think it's a journey. I wouldn't even say we're midway through it. I think it has a lot of work to be done,
Definitely.
and art can be a great channel to do it. Not the only channel, but definitely a very important channel to do it. And we have made big progress in the past, and you know, I think there is a lot that is going to happen in the future as well.
Yeah, I genuinely think that the sort of environment and the culture, like even 10 or 15 years ago, was very, very different from what it is now in terms of how far we've come in both representation as well as societal acceptance. And you're someone who has worked in a bunch of different fields, right? From software engineering to, being more creative. How do you
Yeah.
think your experiences have differed in terms of people just accepting their identities in a way, like in the last 10 or 15 years?
Right. I think I was lucky enough to start my career in a very egalitarian sort of organization where it really did not matter. And that is how I think it should be. Like, it's great that, everybody is an individual and identified for who they are, and it's fantastic whether, they're recognized, acknowledged for who they are.
Yeah.
Um, but in a work environment, I think sometimes it's just enough to kind of, do your work, not be discriminated, very, very important.
Yeah.
Uh, and be praised for your work. You're there to work.
Yeah.
You're there to, hate saying this, but you're there to kind of forward the corporate agenda
Right. Yeah.
at that company. So it wasn't that hard. I think society has changed a lot. More than society, I think our culture has evolved in a way to kind of be more accepting, more all inclusive sort of culture. And commerce is a huge driver as well, in terms of, like, when we talk about certain restaurants or, certain franchisees or whatever, why do you want to celebrate a month, or, why do you want to do that? I think there is commercial aspects to it as well, as one might think, but at the same time, I think it's very important that there is visibility now.
Definitely true. Yeah.
And just for that one little factor of, like, okay, great, we have exposure, we have visibility, you should just be happy about it. Like, acknowledge it and say that it's great. I'm
Yeah.
happy about it. Um, Apart from that, as I progressed in my career, like I said, I moved on to media and stuff like that. A huge difference in the way one is, perceived. A huge difference in the way how much it mattered as to your identity and stuff like that. Again, I don't think that media is something that is completely, how do I say, completely rid of any sort of negative feelings towards communities or any community, any minority in the world. But at the same time, I think it's a more malleable environment.
Okay.
It's People are open to opinions. People are not just about one's identity, but also about anything, like from political opinions to, I don't like this food and I like that food. So
Yeah.
it's just a more open environment.
Makes sense.
Yeah. Now I work in a more sort of individual capacity, so it doesn't matter as much.
Mm-hmm.
But I work with artists who I help, kind of build formats to have workshops and have performances at the space where I work.
Mm-hmm.
And honestly, I've realized a huge change. People do not have that kind of wall anymore. They're more open to being like, it does not matter,
Yeah, makes sense.
right? Art is art. It does not matter whether,
Hmm.
you want to talk to me as an artist, or you want to talk about, my personal preferences,
Hmm.
right? They're two very distinct things.
Yeah. So they're like separating those two, which is
Moreover, I think they are in fact mixing it. I wouldn't say they're separate, but they are mixed.
okay.
I don't know if you're following exactly what I'm trying
I
to
think I
say,
get
but
what you mean. So you're basically trying to say that they know that there is a certain
it's a part of if it's a part of their identity, not the
okay.
whole of their identity,
Yeah. As it should
right?
be, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And like we spoke before, that as society evolves,
Mm-hmm.
you get more integrated into it
Yeah.
rather than being like, oh, this is something different.
Hmm.
And I think that is an interesting evolution that's happening.
Definitely.
Happy about it.
Yeah. Going back to something that you said earlier, as you said, we obviously should be happy that we get a lot of visibility during Pride Month, and that is extremely important and very very amazing too. Like it's fun um, seeing just people be out and open and proud of who they are during Pride Month. But at the same time, when it comes to corporates, there are certain companies, I would say, that sort of take advantage of that sort of representation in order to appeal to the queer community while also not including them entirely in a way. To give you an example, let's say they obviously during Pride Month is all about the queer communities, boosting our presence, showcasing their queer characters. But at the same time, a few years ago, they were also supporting the "Don't Say Gay" bill, which was out in the USA, I think Florida, but in the USA in general. So that's something that also is very important to call out. Like our identities aren't something that should be, commercialized per se or taken advantage of.
Yeah, I think the topic's very deep.
Yeah.
Number one, let's break it down in this way, right? Like companies exist for a certain reason,
To
right?
make money.
Yeah,
Mostly.
to make money to some extent, I think. But at the same time, like you said, it's very important to make them aware of what their audience wants
Mm-hmm.
and what their stakeholders. I mean, I think anybody who buys a product from any company is a stakeholder in that company, right? What their stakeholders are looking for. And as you rightly said, if there is something that is not okay,
Mm-hmm.
there is there has to be a channel in which by which the company or the corporate or whoever, whichever organization, hears about it, right? And instead of like looking back at it and thinking, oh, this is what went wrong and this is what you did wrong and this is what needs to be corrected, that can happen on the side, but at the same time it passes on a very strong message to companies saying that you do it again and you do it again and again and again, and it's not going to be okay with a
A
large
lot of people,
audience. Yeah, and that is what makes them think. And I think change in society is slow, even slower in corporates, but corporates can lead the way sometimes and make really positive changes, which we have seen as well. So I always look at it, like you want to count you want to count the number of colors in the rainbow, let's do that. Or you can look at the sky and say, okay, there's only one color, which is blue, right? So let's not do that. Let's look at the fact that there are multiple steps that we have taken forward, and there are a lot of interesting companies doing a lot of work in the right direction.
Yeah.
It would be sad. I mean, it's human brain to kind of focus on the negatives. I would say it's sad that we would do that. Focus only on that one little black dot on a big white paper.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
But a lot of the times, okay, so in the case that I spoke of, it's not just a small black dot, right? This is actively a bill which is passed in an entire country. And if you're supporting the queer community, like through your media, through Pride Month, through other avenues, but behind the scenes, you're sort of influencing and appealing and funding that bill, that's also something that should be bought out in the open.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And I have worked in the media in the past, right? So I would say that it is something that definitely needs to come out. And instead of doing like a public trial, it's very important that these companies are held
Accountable.
yeah, like whoever is doing this is not necessarily held accountable but answerable as to what could be their thought process behind it, like why.
Yeah.
That's very important for us to find out and to understand who, support works both ways. So it's a good study is what I would say.
Yeah, makes sense. I had another question for you. So do you think that the queer community is like more outspoken or like more into art in general?
I think collectively the any community that has been oppressed to a large extent, or anybody who has gone through emotions in their life, uh, has a stronger sort of artistic outlet, is what I believe. Has a stronger viewpoint and has a viewpoint that is a little different from from the generic viewpoint of things, right?
Yeah.
And as in case of the queer community, as people are growing up, there is always a part of you or a part of that person that might feel curious, I want to keep this part of it under wraps.
Yeah.
I don't know, like, with the fear of judgment or whatever. But then once that floodgate is opened,
Yeah.
there is a gush of things that is going to come out, right?
Yeah.
And at that point, you don't know what can flourish and what cannot. But definitely, the amount of empathy that is developed, you understand the pain of others, you understand the happiness that you find happiness in smaller things. There is a level of self-recognition, self-identity as well, because you need to know yourself, you need to first accept yourself, and only when you accept yourself will that transcend into your immediate family,
Yeah.
friend circles, and people that matter. And I think there's a very interesting saying by Dr. Seuss, I think, that says that man, be who you are, because people that matter will not mind, and people that mind should not matter.
Yeah, that's a very good saying.
So it is something that I think applies even more to artists, because you have to express yourself.
Yeah.
Right? How long do you want to keep it hidden? You never know. You never know who you might become or how you might spread your wings once you know say that hey, I am going to take that plunge.
Yeah.
I don't know if you know about this. I think it's a meme or it's something that I saw where there's a little bird and the mother, and I think it has been re-quoted from somewhere, but she's like, I'm very scared of jumping from the nest, and then he's like, what if I fall? And the mother says, like, what if you fly? Right?
Yeah.
I think it's a very it's a very interesting saying and a very interesting thought, that how do you know you have to take the plunge?
Yeah, it's a leap of faith.
A leap of faith, yeah, definitely.
And that boldness that you're talking about, I really admire that. Like personally, some of my favorite art forms and artists who are not scared to be completely themselves. I feel like when you're true to your vision, those are the sort of art forms that really move me.
Yeah, definitely. But there's another trait that I have noticed in a lot of artists is that they produce that work and then they kind of hate it themselves for a while.
Yeah, I get what you
Right?
mean.
So because that art is there, it is a piece of them that was. You kind of distribute the a little piece of you in all the little artworks that you have done in the past, and that lives there.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that person evolves.
Definitely, a lot of the greatest directors that I know, they all like sort of despise their older works, even though I consider them masterpieces. The world considers them masterpieces.
Yeah.
But they probably remind.
Yeah, but it's also about human psychology, where you look back and say, I could have done it better.
Yeah, true, true.
Should I have known what I know today, I could have gone back and
You tend to focus on the degrees too much.
Yeah. I mean, especially people who are perfectionists will do that. I could have handled this part better.
Yeah.
I could have taken this thing in a different angle.
Mhm.
speak in more of your terms, this angle, or this topic could have been dealt with differently.
Mhm.
Yeah, yeah, it is true. I think that happens with everyone.
Yeah.
If I look back and I really liked what I made the first time when I made a terrarium, but now when I look back at it, I'm like, not really. It
Yeah.
was not that great.
Makes sense. And I feel like that's true for not just art, but life in general. Like we look back on things and tend to focus on, the things that we could have done better. But we should also focus on seeing how far we've come and where we are right now.
Yeah, now you're speaking my language. I
Yeah,
said that in the past.
exactly.
That it is pointless sometimes. I mean, you learn from history, definitely.
Mhm.
You don't forget about it, but how long you want to dwell on it and how much you want to focus on that versus looking at all the good that's happening in the world and saying that, hey, let's encourage the good
Yeah.
rather than constantly only focusing on the negative.
Yeah.
So I think going forward, that's a great learning that we can take forward, and where art and science intersect
Mhm.
is also, I think, where magic will happen and has
That's very
always
true.
happened in the past,
Yeah.
right? Because you don't need to master both of them.
Mhm.
You inherently and very subconsciously will eventually master it. But the journey is what creates that art. That's important.
Yeah, I agree with you. And I feel like that's also a good note to end this podcast on.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you for joining us today.
Yeah,
And
thanks for inviting me.
yeah, it was amazing, and we should definitely collaborate in the future. To everyone watching, please follow our socials and keep an eye out for all the work that we do. Um, Thank you.
Thanks. Thank you so much. Thanks.